Welcome, everyone. I can see people are beginning to join us. That's great. Fantastic. I'm going to make a start on the summer induction session for criminology. Bear with me, everyone. Okay, so as I'm presenting, guys, if you do have any questions, you have the chat box function there. When we get towards the end, I will happily answer any questions that you've got. Okay, guys, so welcome to the NUVIC taster session for Level 3 Diploma in Criminology. What we're going to do this morning is we're going to start with an activity. This will get you kind of thinking about some of the issues that criminologists often face when they're trying to understand what it is that drives criminal behaviour. So I'm not going to say anything more at this point, as it could affect how you participate in this session. However, what I would like you to do is to have a pen and paper handy, because you can do a bit of a thinking task for me this morning. And then when we've gone over the task, we're going to discuss a little bit more about the course, how it's run. You'll have an opportunity to ask me some questions. I am joined here this morning by 4 of my lovely criminology students. We have Hafsa, Jemima, Sazida and Mariam as well that have joined us. So you also have an opportunity to ask them some questions towards the end of this session when we do our Q&A. Okay, guys, so let's make a start. We're doing a moral dilemma activity. So if you've just joined us, I just want you to make sure you've got pen and paper handy. This is something that we call the trolley problem. And we're going to look at 2 versions of the trolley problem this morning. Okay, version number 1, I want you to imagine this scenario, okay? There is a railway carriage that's headed towards 5 people who can't get out of the way. These people will die unless you decide to divert the railway carriage onto another track. That decision comes with a cost. There is another person stuck on that track as well, and that person will die. What do you do? Do you flick the switch and divert the train carriage, killing the other person, killing the one person on the other track, or do you allow the train to continue, killing the 5? So, guys, I want you to think about that for a moment. And I want you to imagine what your response to this might actually be, okay? What do you do? Have a little bit of a think about it, okay? What do you do? So just write down your response in a bit of paper. You can share with me later. Are you going to flick the switch to divert the train carriage, killing the one person on that track? Or are you going to let the train continue killing the 5 people? What do you do, guys? Okay. Hopefully you've all written down your response to that dilemma there. These dilemmas are used quite commonly by psychologists to try and indicate something about our behaviour. I'm going to move on now to the trolley problem version number 2. See how things change in this version. Okay. Now, this version of the trolley problem involves a railway carriage headed towards 5 people who can't get out of the way. Again, these people will die. You are standing behind a very large stranger on a footbridge above the railway tracks. The only way to save the 5 people is to push the stranger over. He will fall to a certain death. But his considerable size will block the oncoming train carriage, saving 5 lives. Okay, now what do you do? Should you push him? Should you push the stranger over, saving the 5 lives, but killing the large stranger? Or will you allow the train to continue, killing the 5 people? So trolley problem version number 2, on your bit of paper there, guys, write down your responses. I'll give you a minute to do that. It's a tricky one, isn't it, guys? We're often faced with these scenarios in real life, but what separates us from other people is what matters, and that's what we're going to look at. Okay, guys, so hopefully you've all written down your responses to those trolley problems. These, as I mentioned before, moral dilemmas. Okay, so moving on. Let's have a bit of feedback. What I'd like you to do is to share with me your answers in the chat box. So tell me, guys, what did you decide to do in the first version of the trolley problem and why? And what you decided to do in the second version of the trolley problem and why? And if you thought the one problem was harder to decide than the other, which one was it and why? So my year 1 criminology students that are here as well, you're welcome to comment as well. Thank you. We've got 1 comment already there from Teresa. Thank you. For the first version, you decided to sacrifice the individual, the one individual. Teresa, can you tell me why you decided to do that in the first version? So you said the second version, you wouldn't actually interfere at all because otherwise that could be murder potentially. That's really interesting. Namphy, for the first one, you flicked the switch to divert the train carriage, killing the person on the other track. Why? Okay, yeah, I'm having a look at some of the other responses that are coming in as well. Thank you for sharing with me your responses. It looks like most of you have said that you're going to save the 5. So in this circumstance, you're looking at the greater good. What would be, the situation that's going to save more lives? Excellent. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Saving 5 lives is better than saving only 1. That's what most people would actually say. Okay, what about the second version then, guys? What do we do? Push the stranger over. What did you say that you would do? Push the stranger over, saving the 5 lives, but killing the larger stranger? Would you just let the train to continue? Look, it's getting more complex now, isn't it? Okay, Natalie, you chose to, oh, sorry, all the responses are coming in now. I need to look further up at the chat box here. You chose to save the 5 people. Utilitarianism says that you should do the thing that benefits the most amount of people. No, absolutely. Yeah, if you look at situation ethics, the answer could be different. That's really interesting. You wouldn't want a stranger to push you over. You wouldn't push anyone. Okay, so just let everyone die then. Yeah? Not pushing anyone over. You chose to kill the 5 people instead. Guys, anyone who chose to kill the 5 people instead, can you tell me why you've chosen to kill the 5 people instead? Why would you choose to kill more people than less people? I can see some responses there. It's about kind of how would you feel in that situation? You wouldn't want to be essentially committing murder, so you'd rather more people die. Would it be the same as committing murder? Is it really the same as committing murder, do you think? You just go in yourself. Wow. Okay. That's not a response I normally get from students. That's really interesting. Yeah, putting one at risk. But you're saving innocent. Okay, yeah. You are. I think that's a really good point about you won't know what you do until you're actually in that situation. Guys, I think some of your comments are really interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I've got some of my students here this morning. Guys, what do you think? If you're still there, Hafsa, Jemima, Sazida, Mariam, what do you think about everyone's responses? And did you think something similar, or did you think differently here? We are going to move on to, in just under a minute, what this actually means. Why are we looking at this moral dilemma this morning? How is this even relevant to criminology? I'll put it into a context for you again. Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult situation. You probably just do the quickest thing, whatever that actually means. But it does actually depend on something a little bit deeper than that. If we are looking at this from a criminology perspective, I'm just going to minimize the chat box for a moment because I want to go on to the next slide. But yeah, thank you so much for your comments. Thanks, Mariam, as well. You wouldn't know until you're actually in that situation. But there are some people that, in responding to this trolley problem, would have absolutely no kind of second thought about what they would do. And they wouldn't say, well, it depends if I'm in the situation and this is what I would do. So let's have a look at what that might be. So I'm just minimizing that chat box now, guys. Okay, so what do the answers indicate? And this could indicate something about you guys. Now, most people would choose to save the 5 in the first dilemma. So one of you did actually mention that in the chat box, that this is the utilitarian argument where we're looking at the greater good. 10% of people take the other choice, which is to kill the 5. Okay, only 10%. Now, I wonder how many of you in the session this morning are actually in that 10% of people. I'm not quite sure if I want to know that. But if you're in that 10%, I don't mind if you tell me, actually. I won't be frightened, I promise. So if you're in the 10%, and if you're confident enough to say so, kill the 5, just comment in the chat box, or you can kind of raise your hands. I don't think anyone will want to say so, will they? Okay, let's come back over to the chat box. That's really interesting. Wouldn't it depend on who that person is? Some of you said that it depends. So what do you mean by that? Like, who that person is? What do you think it would depend on? Oh, that's interesting. If they have power, what difference do you think it makes if they've got power? Oh, this is getting quite interesting. If they've got the person could cure cancer, but what if you didn't know that? Someone quite close to you. Oh yeah, no, definitely. But the question being, though, if you are a psychopath, does it even make any difference? Do you see what I mean? In the second dilemma, most people actually find that quite difficult. When I say most, I mean people that don't have particular tendencies. Some great ideas there in the chat box, guys. Some real potential criminology students I've got here this morning. See, with a second dilemma, it is more difficult because it becomes more personal. You know, in this circumstance, you've got to physically push someone over. It's not flicking a switch. You've got to push someone over, okay? But for a psychopath, pushing the big guy over the bridge actually is easy as problem number 1. Trolley problem number 2 is supposed to be more difficult for the average person. And when I say the average person, what I mean by that is not a person that has psychopathic tendencies. But for a psychopath, actually pushing that big guy over, that's not a problem. You know, what's the big deal? Push. You know, there you go. Oh, Olivia, so you picked to push a stranger over. Let's have a look at what you've said. Stranger sounds a lot less inviting than people. Oh, I see. Okay, so the way that the kind of trolley problem is worded. So if it sounds like they're more like you, that makes sense. Okay. I really like some of those ideas actually. Excellent. All right, fantastic. Okay, so this is an example of an activity, you know, that we would do in criminology. The idea behind that is to kind of think about what is it that is behind criminal behavior, you know? What is it that kind of creates these psychopathic tendencies almost? So guys, should we think about that for a moment? So a psychopath is a person that feels no empathy for another individual, okay? Why is it, do you think, that people develop these kind of tendencies to be quite cold, insensitive? Why is it? Why do we have some psychopaths that find it quite easy? You know, your typical serial killer, quite often, you know, well, obviously they're psychopaths, you know? They show no remorse for their actions. So a person that would have psychopathic tendencies wouldn't try to justify why they want to push the big guy over. You know, there's no justification behind that. Yeah, some great ideas there. Some of you kind of have talked about upbringing and trauma there. I can see some kind of comments about the environment as well. So when we say environment, what do we mean by that? I can see the comment there about trauma, and I think that that's a fantastic contribution because, quite rightly, guys, often what we find when we look at the kind of deep early history of psychopaths, you know, serial killers, some of you most infamous serial killers, they have experienced early childhood trauma. So you are absolutely right. Yeah, thanks, guys. You know, you are right. It can be genetic as well. And I was going to get onto that on my next slide, actually. You know, what is it that kind of shapes us? Where does this tendency come from to not feel empathy for another person, to be able to kill or carry out a crime with no remorse? Okay, so we've got some comments here about the brain as well, or sociological factors as well. So what kind of sociological factors do we think that could lead to criminal behaviour? So we have talked a lot here about abusive environments, talked a lot here about childhood trauma. There's some comments here about sociological impacts as well. Yeah, where they've been brought up. I mean, there are lots of arguments that if you experience poverty, then you're more likely to turn to crime. So it's that idea about, you know, where do you live? Is it an area that where individuals experience socioeconomic deprivation as well? You do tend to find higher levels of crime in those areas. So rejection from people around you, that's really interesting. And there is evidence to show that rejection can actually lead people into a life of crime there as well. It can impact on their kind of self-esteem, could create kind of that anger festering. Really interesting ideas, guys. Thank you. Okay, so what we know about psychopaths is that actually, interestingly, they've got less brain activity in emotional areas of the brain in comparison to a normal person. So when I say normal, I just kind of mean, you know, a person that doesn't have these psychopathic tendencies. So what I mean here is like, you know, there is a lot of evidence to show, and you can see that in the brain scan on the picture on the slide there. We have a part of the brain called the amygdala, everyone, and your amygdala is what controls your emotions. Interestingly, psychopaths have less of an emotional reaction to the second dilemma, because they've got less brain activity. So if you have a look at the image that I've just projected there, and you can see on the screen, have a look at the pictures on the right hand side. Where you see a lot of the darkened areas actually shows that a person's got less brain activity. So it's really interesting because you can kind of relate your responses to these moral dilemmas to what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're criminals, but it'd be great to have you all in person, so we can actually talk about this. It's quite difficult, you know, when you're doing an online session. I love to sort of just directly interact with my students. So what matters is not so much what the person will do, but it's how they feel about it as well. Okay, so getting on to that, you know, I know some of you said, actually, I decided that I would just push the person. It's more about how you feel about it. So we have talked this morning about whether criminals are born or made, and you've really contributed to that as well, guys. That's fantastic. But I'm just going to quickly share with you some of the research. And this is really interesting, actually. But there's a really famous neuroscientist called Jim Fallon who's looked at the brains of killers, and he's actually found that parts of the brain are abnormal in killers. And that's telling us that actually maybe it's more that, you know, what's behind criminal behavior, particularly, you know, murderers. It is the fact that, is it more due to nature, biological factors, than nurture, which is environment? And I know some of you mentioned that massive nature-nurture debate. And, you know, I'd love to kind of debate that with you. Are we born, you know, a criminal, or are we made? And I'm going to leave you on that thought of, are we born or made? And when you do join, I hope, the level 3 criminology course in September, then we'll have some deep discussions about that. Okay. So let's get on to the more important stuff, shall we? The exam board is WJC. Teaching is 4 hours and 40 minutes a week. And the way that you're actually assessed is 50% controlled assessment, which you do on a computer across 2 days, 4 hours on one day, 4 hours on another day. And that controlled assessment is internal. And then at the end of the year, you'll take a written examination as well, and that's worth 50%. But don't worry, it's not 8 hours like the first assessment. This one is just an hour and a half. And that's like a written examination that you're normally used to. And that's an external exam. Students always ask that, is it 4 hours with no break? No, I'm not that mean. I will give you breaks. 5 GCSEs, guys, at minimum, including 5 in English language and a 4 in maths, and an average GCSE score of 5. Just to kind of introduce you to some of the topics, what do we look at on this course? We look at how we can change awareness of crime. So in Unit 1, we kind of look at what are the underreported crimes, things like domestic abuse, hate crimes, honour crimes. These are all unreported, and we look at what we can do collectively as a society to change people's awareness of these crimes. We try to understand why they're unreported. You know, why do people not want to report the fact that they are a victim of domestic abuse, particularly if the victim is male? And we also look at why people turn to crime. So we look at criminological theories, and we've done a little bit of that this morning, just to give you a bit of an idea. We also do crime scene to the courtroom. So we have a look at everything that happens from the moment a crime takes place up until the moment that a person is sentenced. You know, who are the agencies involved? How do forensic scientists get involved here? How do we profile criminals, etc.? And then Unit 4 is crime and punishment. We look at the effectiveness of the criminal justice system in England and Wales. So that's a snapshot of the criminology course. You'd normally be taught in the criminology classroom, which is the room that I'm in now. You can see behind me, I've got the crime scene on the wall there. My favourite thing in this classroom. Right, we've got some questions, have we? Let's have a look. Some of you've raised your hands as well. Just bear with me. Yeah, no, absolutely. Of course, you can do an A level alongside it. So it's only BTEC, and it's equivalent to an A level. If so, yeah. Do you know what? I've just got a couple of slides to go over, and then we'll come back to that. So if you could just hang on, I'd say for about 5 minutes, we're going to do Q&A at 11:30, if that's okay. And I think, Christina, you raised your hand. Are you okay, Christina? Have you got a question? Trips, I'll get to that as well. Okay. So if you could just bear with me in terms of the questions. I don't know if you raised your hand by accident, Christina. All right. Okay, I'll come back to, okay, no worries, Christina. I'll come back to the chat box in terms of questions and question and answers, and I've got my students here today as well in case you want to ask them anything. So we've got about sort of just over, well, we've got about 15 minutes left anyway, so we've still got some time. We'll come to Q&A. I know you're all eager. Okay, so how to prepare. One of the ways in which you can prepare for this course, and I love these documentaries, on YouTube you can find documentaries such as, sorry, excuse me, Crimes That Shook Britain or Murders That Shocked the Nation. These are really good because they cover infamous cases that we're going to look at in class. You may have heard of some of these, but you might want to watch some of them to prepare you for the course and really kind of get you interested in them. Rose West, you may have heard of, Harold Shipman, Lee Rigby, Rachel Nicoll. These are some really important ones that we are going to look at. There's also ITV's Crime and Punishment season. There's loads that excuse me, those that ITV tend to do on crime and punishment. So you can prepare in terms of watching some of these documentaries. I do believe that these this recording will be available to you, so you don't need to write this down. You can always kind of play back later. There are also many Netflix series that you can watch if you've got access to Netflix, and a lot of these also link to the Black Lives Matter movement as well. So there's a whole list of them, and I've got about 14 there. As I say, the session is being recorded, so you can always watch this back and make a note of some of those. But these are 14 that either, you know, I've watched myself and really recommend, or that some of my students have watched and have recommended. As I mentioned before, we've got 4 of my students here this morning. So guys, if you've got any recommendations of things that you think that our prospective criminology students should watch, then guys, please pop those in the chat box. I think you guys are still here, Hafsa, Jemima, Sasida and Mariam. If there's anything that you really recommend, whether it's books, whether it's documentaries, anything on Netflix, films, then it will be great for some recommendations. Okay. One of the things that I would like you guys to do, if you're really interested in taking up criminology, then something that I'd like you to do over the summer period is to keep a crime diary, and it could look however you want it to look. You could do it in a book, you could keep it electronically, whatever you want. I just want you to keep an eye on crime in the news. And what I'd like you to do in your crime diary is just to kind of summarize the crime, any of the crimes that you found really interesting, and what happened in that crime, who was the offender, who was the victim. And I'm actually going to offer prizes in September for my favorite crime diaries as well. I want you to keep an eye on, how the news is representing those crimes as well. Because one of the things that we do look at in criminology is the impact of media representation on how crimes kind of are seen by the general public. Okay, I have been doing a lot of talking. I'm just going to do a quick slide on careers, and then we are going to go over to the chat box, which is going to be Q&A. And I've got my 4 students here that are going to help me out with this. They'll be able to answer some of your questions as well. So, guys, I just want you to get ready. Hafsa, Jemima, Sazida, Mariam, to help me out. After I've just gone over careers. This might be one of the questions that you have for me anyway, but the career opportunities are so wide-ranging and exciting for criminology. You can go into police force, a prison service. Many of my students just go straight into law. You can also go into social work as well and work with young people. You choose that as your specialism. So much victim support, for victims of domestic violence, honor crimes, hate crimes, and so forth. Probation service. Look, guys, it's so wide-ranging careers here. Okay, so Q&A, over to you and over to my students as well. Guys, if you have any questions, now's your opportunity to pop them in the chat box. I will answer some of them for you as well, but you also kind of have the opportunity to ask my students. Guys, I'm going to start with, actually, if you've got anything that you want to ask my criminology students, can you pop those in the chat box? Hopefully you guys are still here. Yes, you are. Okay, I'm just going to open up the chat box now. We can spend about 10 to 15 minutes on that. Okay. Right, I'm just going to go up. I'm going to answer some of the questions that we've got already. And if you have some for my students as well, then let me know. So come back to that. Absolutely, you can do 2 A-levels alongside criminology, or some students do other applied certificate courses. Other social sciences work really well with criminology. Often you've got students that do criminology with sociology or psychology. Often our students do criminology with law and a 3rd subject, possibly politics. Okay. Or, many of our students also study English alongside. So you kind of choose either social sciences or humanities subject. Trips, oh, absolutely. It's been really difficult this year in terms of trips, guys, because of the pandemic. So we are going to keep an eye on things, and I've got loads that I want to do with students next year. It's very much dependent on the restrictions and how things pan out. So fingers crossed for those trips. But, one of the big ones that I do with my students is a Jack the Ripper tour. Sometimes we visit the Supreme Court or Magistrates Courts. We also have external speakers as well from agencies of the criminal justice system. Okay, so resources, books, we provide access to the main textbook. So you don't need any additional resources for this course. Thank you for contributing, Brooklyn 99, BuzzFeed Unsolved True Crime. Thank you. Yeah, Brooklyn 99, okay, you as well. Yeah, thank you. More of a comedy, but you also recommend. Thank you, guys. Oh, Luther's a great one. That's one of my favorites as well. Yep, Trials of the Menendez Brothers. Yes, thank you. 21 Jump Street, thank you. Does the level 3 diploma equal to 3 A levels? No, it doesn't. It's equivalent to 1 A level. So you must study this alongside 2 other subjects. Oh, favourite topic area in criminology? That's a really good question. Guys, and my students, if you're still here, could you answer that one, please? So from your first year, what has been your most favourite topic area? If you study criminology at sixth form, then at uni, would you be able to use it in another country? Do you know what? That's a really good question, and I've never had that one before. If you don't mind, I'm going to make a note of that. If you want to become a detective in another country, I would imagine so, because I do know that there are criminologists that we have in this country that have specialised elsewhere, but I'm going to come back to you on that one. Books that I would recommend you to buy to help you to get a head start. I would say that actually I might want to put a link in the chat box. I think that I could put a link in the chat box. Or I wonder if there's a way for me to get that information out to you, like with a whole list of links. I'll have a chat with our marketing department about that one, okay? Because that way everyone could kind of benefit from that. So I didn't put the books on this slide, but there are lots of great books that you could read to get a head start. Thank you for asking. 4 lessons a week. How many students in a class? Criminology is quite a big one, so we are usually quite full. I mean, the average class size is 24, but it can be more than that as well. Tends not to be less than that. Okay, so lessons are either an hour or they are an hour and 10 minutes, totaling 4 hours, 40 minutes in a week. So Mariam, you liked the theories because it gives you different perspectives of why criminals act the way they do. I must admit, Mariam, I would agree with you. Criminological theories in the first year particularly is my favourite as well. But once you get to the second year, you know, if I had a second year student on the call here this morning, they'd say that unit 3 is their favourite, which is crime scene to the courtroom, because it's more practical, where we kind of have a look at the nature of what goes on at a crime scene and how you can profile them. You know, things like kind of fingerprinting and blood splatter analysis and things like that. Hafsa, yeah, thank you. Analysing different types of crimes you like to that and the reasons why they go unreported. Yeah, I think it's really important to look at why crimes go unreported, because then otherwise, how would we tackle crime unless we know what was causing that in the first place? Excellent. Okay, so guys, have we got any more questions for me or for my students? Anything that you want to ask them? Okay. Yes, we do look at eyewitness testimony. Yeah, it's a part of Unit 3. Absolutely. We do look at the impact of, you know, witness memory being unreliable and the impact this has on miscarriages of justice and using that evidence in a courtroom. And there are lots of examples of cases where eyewitness reports have been inaccurate and it has led to people being convicted for a crime that they've not committed, and they've been sentenced to life, you know, and we're relying on people's memories, and that's a really tough thing, because when you've just witnessed a crime, it is quite traumatic and our memories are quite unreliable, you know. Yeah, we also do. Yeah, I think I just mentioned that now, Teresa. We looked at, we do look at miscarriages of justice. We look at how sometimes within the criminal justice system, sentences are not valid. You know, we look at harsh sentences. We look at unduly lenient sentences as well, and what impact that has on and that what that impact that has, you know, kind of on society, on the criminal justice system as a whole, on the victims, families, so on and so forth. Some really good questions. Thanks, guys, for engaging with me. Does the exam consist of essay questions? Yes. So when we're talking about the written exam, yes, there are 2 essays, but they are 9 markers. The controlled assessment's slightly more complex. It's not you writing essays. It's more you kind of typing almost like a report. Okay. So you've got 1 exam at the end. There's 1 controlled assessment at the end, and there's 1 written exam at the end. We tend to do the controlled assessment by December. So the kinds of jobs, so I went over that a few minutes ago. I'll change the slide so you can see those. Guys, if you've got any more questions for my students as well, that would be really good. So there are the potential careers there. Yeah, controlled assessment is 100 marks. It's massive. Yeah, it's worth 50%. 8 hours, 100 marks. Our students tend to do really well if they prepare. I know. But if you prepare throughout the year, honestly, you'll be fine. Some of our students do so well on that controlled assessment. There's a potential there to get an A star, you see, with the controlled assessment. Oh, yeah, that's something for me to mention. Although this is a level 3 diploma, it's graded A star to E. Okay, so it's not like your BTEC applied subjects, which are graded pass merit distinction. So controlled assessment, if I just kind of describe that to you, it's an exam that takes place in college under controlled conditions, and you will get a scenario and you have to answer questions related to that scenario based on everything that you've learned in Unit 1. So it might be you have to prepare a report about something. But one of the massive things I must mention, the first controlled assessment you do in the first year, you have to develop a campaign for an unreported crime. You've got to develop materials as well. But I would obviously work with you on how to do that effectively. Any other questions? Any questions for my students? Guys, so Hafsa, Jemima, Sazida, Mariam, if you're still there, we've got a couple of minutes left. Could you tell everyone what you like most about this course? Thank you, Mariam. The campaigns are fun to make. I'm glad you think so. Since it's the first day, you find out on results day, you do. Yeah, in August. So you get your result at the end of the first year for the certificate, and then the end of the second year for the full diploma. Still got my lovely criminology students in there. Can you tell me what you like most about this course? And then if there's any further questions, we'll look at that. But we have got about 2 minutes left. So
Miss, can you hear me?
Yes, Hafsa.
I was gonna say I like how it's like split, like how 50% of it is you know, like the controlled assessment, and then we've got the 50% like the actual exam, like at the end of year 2. And I think year 1, because we were in year 1, so I don't know about year 2, but year 1 has been like, for me, like I think it's been
Oh, you're right there. We've lost Hafsa. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's been like you guys have been really helpful. Like I think if you like throughout, like how you guys say, like keep our notes updated and everything throughout each unit, I think year 1 can be like a really good way to get a higher grade. I think it's like it's basically you're at an advantage in year 1, because if you basically do what you guys say and like, you know, update our notes regularly and just you know, keep everything organized, it's really easy to get a good grade at the end of year 1.
Thank you, Hafsa. That's great to hear. Really nice to get that positive feedback as we kind of end the session. I'm just going to have a look at Mariam's comments. So Mariam is also one of my students. She says it's a really insightful subject. You learn all the different opinions and theories on crimes, and some that you're saying that you didn't, some theories that you didn't know about before, like sort of realist theories, and it helps to kind of bring more awareness. And I think, guys, that's one of the most important things about this subject, is that it does shed light on some really important issues. And I really hope that you do decide to take up this subject, because it will help to develop you in ways kind of beyond the classroom as well. Thank you, Sazida. So learning about why people commit the crimes they do, I think it is really important. It helps you to kind of reflect on society and yourself, you know, and our role in society. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining the session this morning. Have a good day. And as I mentioned, I hope that you will join the course in September. Just a quick note before you go, enrollment is on Thursday, the 12th of August. Okay. Thank you very much. See you later, everyone.